Good evening, everybody. It is 6:02 p.m. on Monday, February 22nd, and this is the Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. If we can go around the table now for roll call, starting with, I guess, Mr. Wolf.
I'm not part of your...
Not part of the ex officio member of the committee. Mr. Wolf is here.
Carol Dites.
Dane Oaks O'Neill.
Connor Kurtz.
Rob Hurley. David Rathgate.
And then we have some administrators present, as well as 2 members of the public. In terms of moving on to item 2, procedures for public participation, we don't seem to have a whole lot of public here tonight, so we'll be kind of open with public comment after items are discussed. And with that being said, we can now move on to item 3, employee recognition, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Hurley.
Basically, the employee recognition program that we ultimately decided to bring to the committee itself doesn't really cost the district any sort of money, at least significant money. Once a month, an employee, it can be a teacher, it can be a custodian, it could be a secretary, it could be anyone, can be nominated by any one of our other employees, including students, for something special or unique that they've done in our buildings themselves. In recognition of that, and it's called the Shining Apple Award, they're going to get a Shining Apple pin they can put on their security badge or a lanyard that they have, and they can wear that. We'll nominate, we're going to put it up on the website in terms of a nomination where someone can do it. It can be anonymous in nature. Basically, we're going to do it once per month, okay? And then at the end of the year, the plan right now is to have like a teacher of the year or something, employee of the year at the end of the year. So that's basically what we have.
All right, great. I think this is a great idea and wouldn't cost anything beyond the cost of the apple.
Just the apple. So.
And then if there's something at the end of the year to celebrate the teacher or employee of the year. Is there any comment on this proposal?
I applaud your effort, Mr. Hurley. I really appreciate it. I think it's a nice gesture and really appropriate.
Give Mr. Harris and the
Mr.
other people that we
Harris.
collaborated with the credit for this. Okay.
Now, who would bear the burden then of processing the applications every month? And is it okay? Does it fit their workload?
Yeah, we'll be okay. We'll take over the district office in terms of when it comes in on the web forms itself, and then we'll look through it. All 3 of us will just take a look through, and we'll see if they're of merit, and then we'll take care of it.
And is this RM Innovation Shining Apple Award?
Oh, yeah.
Is it a subset of a program or a larger program?
No, it is
I love it.
what it
really
is.
love it. Thank you.
Yep.
Just, I guess a word.
Trademark that, is it?
Yeah, we better.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. Me personally, I still think a small, gift card or something would have been, nice to kind of add. Nice to get the recognition, but it's also nice to get a little something. I think I was probably not in the majority there.
I would just add, when going through the applications, perhaps just to avoid potential future embarrassment, make sure that the employee, looking back at the employee's history to make sure everything is good there.
That's part of the plan.
Good, okay, just wanted to hear that. Well, I guess, and I'm fine moving this on to the full board to establish it as a program. We don't really have, I'm thinking that would be good even to bring the full board in the loop, seeing as some of the administration, I guess, could implement on their own. I don't know if full board approval is necessary, but seeing as this committee discussed it, I think it would be good to send it to the full board. So does anybody have any changes they'd like to make, or is there a motion to advance this to the full board tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Any objection? All right, we're recommending the Daniel Boone School District Employees of the Month Shining Apple Award for tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Glad to see that moving forward. Next up, item 4 is something I wanted to discuss. The civics diagnostic survey, I thought was a good way to describe it. This committee has talked a lot about civics and trying to figure out how we can do it better. Before trying to improve what we already have, though, I think it might be prudent to determine what we actually have and what our students actually know at the time they graduate. So I thought, and I know some schools do this and some states require it. I'm going to turn the floor over to Mrs. Bites in a little bit so she can give a little bit more background. But my idea was to give the United States Civics Naturalization Exam to a representative sample of our Daniel Boone seniors to see what their grasp, the grasp and the breadth of their knowledge in regard to American history and American civics. And I first learned about this exam reading about the process that future Americans need to go through in order to become naturalized citizens. And the USCIS, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, they have a 100-question test just asking basic questions about the American government system and some questions about American history. And I think it really encompasses everything that every citizen should know. And I'd be very interested to see how our Daniel Boone students are doing there. So my idea was to, in the spring, randomly select 30 students representing those in honors classes, academic classes, conceptual classes, and give them this exam just as a baseline to see and ensure that what is being absorbed by our students is the information that they should know as American citizens. And then we'll be able to go through and look at those results and see, for example, how many students got question number 9 wrong. If a lot of students did, we know we'd have to focus on that more in our civic curriculum. But I have right in front of me the test, and I'll just read some of the questions here. For example, let's see. What is the supreme law of the land? And the answer is the Constitution. What do we call the first 10 amendments to the Constitution? The Bill of Rights. Like just very elementary questions about our country. And these are all available online from uscis.gov. But I think this would be a good way, before figuring out if we need to make any types of changes to the civics curriculum, knowing what our students have prior to graduation. So Mrs. Bites, from what I said, is there anything you'd like to add? I spoke to Mrs. Bites, also shared this idea with me. We were discussing it a little bit privately.
I do like the idea, and in my research I found that several states have already adopted passing of the test as a graduation requirement with 60s or 70s scores. And it's not at all what I think we're proposing here. Todd and I have been fleshing this idea. It's just really an informational type of exit exam. There would be absolutely no repercussions on anyone, on the student, on the teachers, on the administration.
So we won't deport them?
Sorry?
I don't think there are many deportations happening now anyway.
No deportations. South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, Wisconsin, North Dakota, Louisiana, Idaho, and Arizona have all adopted some of it. And again, we're not requiring, I'm not suggesting that we require it as a graduation requirement, although, perhaps sometime in the future, the discussion would evolve to that. But just want to get a kind of a gauge on how much our kids are actually retaining from their social studies training.
Yeah, and I thought this would be a good way to get a lot of information without taking too much time from the school day, without having it would be silly just to add a brand new test and call it a graduation requirement without anything. And I know some school districts are moving in that direction just to make sure that their students understand history, but take 30 kids out of civics one day, they can go to guidance and they can take this exam, and we'd have a lot of information. And I think it might be beneficial to our curriculum writers when it comes time to write the civics curriculum. But that's just something to think about.
And I wouldn't want to go any further without our administrators actually weighing in on that.
Yeah.
And teachers, principals. Any other questions from the committee?
Mr. McKnight, are there any specific civics classes, as opposed to picking up this information in history classes along the way, are there specific civics classes?
Well, social studies isn't all history.
Right,
So,
of course,
so
yeah.
You'll have principles of democracy. So you will have courses like that. I think if this is a direction that we choose to go in, I think that, I would want our students collectively, K to 12, to be in a process understanding government and civics and the role. So you want to put kind of the scaffolded steps along the way, and, what would be appropriate to know at 3rd grade, 6th grade, 9th grade, 12th grade, and see that it trends that way. Not here at 12th grade, do you know it? So you can build it out in a process, I think it would be supportive, if that's what you wanted to measure.
Yeah, I mean, my only question was with regard to, if we choose to have a sample of kids take the test, if it's information that they've gotten piecemeal in classes that aren't called civics, right? That they don't know they were. I mean, they know they were getting the information, but they weren't studying for a specific thing like this. It just makes it that much more difficult to.
I can assure you, knowing our teachers, okay, and knowing educators in general, if there's the old line that what gets measured gets treasured, they will be making sure kids know that particular information. If we feel as a community it's worthwhile to know that, then there's a way to make sure we design it. So, but there is a specific course that, in 12th grade, American government, which encompasses U.S. economic system and our U.S. government model in 12th grade. That's potentially that course.
And that's an elective?
No.
Okay, that's okay.
I just want to go over the topics of which there's 5 or 6 or 3 questions under, for example, holidays. There's 2 questions. Symbols, it's not just American government. Geography, 6 very basic questions. The 1800s, recent American history, and other important historical information, about 10 under that category. 1800s.
Well, if Mrs. Place doesn't mind me interrupting, the reason I think this would be great to use is because it's already been determined by the feds, if you will, that this is the bare minimum that new Americans need to know in order to become Americans. And just speaking philosophically here for a second, I think if we expect new Americans to understand and know this information, at the very least, I think we, as native-born Americans, as people who have been Americans all our lives, we should really know it as well. There shouldn't be differences in class there between new and born. This is stuff that we should all know and all citizens should know, in my view at least. And the great thing is it already exists. It's already been collated, and I just think it would be an easy way to get some information. So I wouldn't mind just maybe talking about this again next month, just a thing to be aware of. And I can, or Mrs. Bice perhaps, if she could just send the link around to the committee and you can take a look at the questions, or I can pass it around now. But they're all very basic pieces of information. But sometimes you see on the news these men on the street interviews, and they'll go up to college kids, maybe on a spring break, and they'll ask them, who was the father of the Declaration of Independence, and they'll give them an incorrect answer. And I just want to make sure that our Daniel students are fully engaged in not necessarily the political process, but understanding at least the very basics of American government. But we've talked about that now at length, and
I'll send it to the principals too.
that sounds great. Thank you. If there's no further comment on that for now, we can move on to item 5, curricular and extracurricular events. So I have it listed on the agenda. The origin, the genesis of this conversation was an email sent by a parent, and there was some concern that an event at one of our elementary schools coexisted with a fundraiser, and the parent objected to having their students, if I'm understanding correctly, perform at a required school event that was also a fundraiser, which made me think that this is something kind of similar that the board discussed about 5 years ago in regard to co-curricular activities. And I thought it might be a good thing for the committee to discuss whether or not it was appropriate, or whether it's appropriate for an in-school class, for example, let's say music, to require a student to participate in a concert for a grade. When I went to elementary school, if I were,
It was middle school, for example.
it was, well, okay, I'm sorry, middle school. The email was in regard to middle school. But the example holds true for any level. For example, when I was in elementary school for music, we had to perform at choral concerts. And a lot of us didn't really like that, but it was something we expected, that was expected of us, and we all did it. And it was either if you show up to the concert, you get 100%, 100 out of 100 points, and if you don't show up to the concert, you get 0 out of 100. And looking back on that, I'm not sure if I think that's the right position for the district to have, because when it comes to the school day, we're providing transportation. You're expected, you have to be in the school. But for these events outside the opening bell and the closing bell, the dismissal bell, I'm not sure if I think it's prudent for students to receive grades. But that's just my view on it. I thought it would be something that would be good at the very least for the committee to discuss, seeing as there was some interest in the community, and it was something we haven't discussed before, at least in a while. So does anybody have any comment on that?
I do. One of the things I do want to correct is that, yes, they do receive a grade for participating. There is a performance for chorus and band in 3 of the 4 quarters, not the first, because they're just getting to know each other and working on their pieces. There is an alternative assignment that is provided, so any student who would run into the issue of not having a ride to get to that performance does have an option. So I can totally understand your viewpoint that if it's either 100 or a 0 and there was nothing else to do. But the kids do have an alternate assignment, and like the documents that I shared with everyone, on more than one occasion, parents are made aware of that situation from day 1 of school. So if there were a transportation issue or something that might arise, they have from September to December or March or May to resolve that in some way. So
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the other difference is that whereas in elementary school, we're all the kids are in there and they're doing these shows for the parents. But we get middle school now, because my kids we're not musically inclined at all. So they took the general music classes, which are, if you're doing the band and the chorus, I think you're a higher level music student, correct?
yes, well, I mean, you obviously have a specialty as opposed to a student who, and they do have the choice to take regular music, so.
And regular music you're not required to do.
No, there
correct?
is no requirement outside of school.
So I think these kids are a higher level student, and I think as part of that, I think you're kind of expected to do these types of events, because that's part of it. This is your career track, or in the arts track, you're expected to do performances. So I would think that's another, there is a class you can take as an option if the beginning of the year the parents say, well, gosh, I don't want my kids having to do these performances, you can take your own music class. I also have to say, I think we know where we're at financially with everything in the district. And I think it's genius that they actually did this and had I think that's a great evening for the parents to go out, have dinner, watch their kids perform, and have other people from the public come in and actually get to see these great kids do the show and have a dinner available to them. So I think it's actually, I'm actually very supportive of it. I think it's great. It's a great idea. So, those are my comments.
Does anybody else have anything to add? I mean, if we're happy with the status quo.
I've shared my comments, and, the goal, I think, is, for the district is kind of restrict these fundraisers as much as possible. And this one fundraiser took the place of several others. And when you look at the time slot that the students are being asked to be there, it's about an hour and a half. And then they can go. But the parents, obviously, they can stay, and It's not as if you're, you know, in the middle school, when you go to a middle school concert, you're gonna see the grades in the middle school. If you go to high school, you can see the grades in the high school. But this, if you looked at the, you know, how the mix, there's the younger grades, and then you see the seniors or the, you know, the jazz band from the high school. So you get that, this is how it starts with, you know, you're listening to, you know, Hot Fresh Buns or whatever it is, the first thing they learn.
Hot cross buns.
I know the tune, it's seared in my mind, I just can't remember the name, but,
Fresh?
and then you get this to hear the natural progressions of these kids, you know, when they've reached the apex of their high school career, and what the difference is. So I think it really is I mean, and it's, I think it's $4 just to attend without the dinner. It's the only one that's like this. So I know it was one person that complained about it, but I mean, the amount of money that they raise, and it does take the place of several other fundraisers, and that's really the goal, is to limit the fundraisers and limit the amount of time, because they don't really need to do anything other than do a basic performance.
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with the fundraiser personally, at least. My issue, or my thought at least, that I thought was worth discussing was whether,
Right, right.
yeah, the
There's two
issue.
We've
pieces here.
commingled two issues.
There's
Yeah.
two, yeah.
So, to speak of it as a fundraiser for the moment, it speaks to the underlying problem that I have with fundraising district-wide. If the organizer of the group is superior at fundraising, at raising money on his cohort of children, then that cohort of children benefits disproportionately as compared to the children who are involved with a leader who may not be as savvy as fundraiser. So we have basically this captive audience, this captive group that can perform and raise money for that particular booster group. So I'm thinking, if music was capable of raising $100,000 a year using student performances, shouldn't that $100,000 go into the wider pool of fundraising dollars that benefit all the students? Why should it benefit just those students who are
It benefits all the music programs.
music programs, right? That's what I'm saying, it
From the
doesn't,
elementary school to,
as opposed to the soccer team that needs new uniforms. That's all I'm saying. We've got all these extracurriculars, and some leaders are good at raising funds, and then those kids get a lot of money raised for them per head. It's like with sports. If the coach is a really good fundraiser, you can raise $10,000 a year. But if the coach, so those kids disproportionately benefit a lot because their group is capable of, their leader knows how to raise funds well. It just seems like it should be going into a pot for all the students, not just that group of students.
But if you're going to do it that way, then every fundraiser would have to donate a portion to the pot as a whole, because
Yeah, I think
if
that's what
you're
we're
a
thinking.
music booster parent, and you know your money's half your money's going to sports, you're gonna be like, well, why am I going to volunteer for this event? Because it's not going to where I want to go to.
We're not talking about parents, we're talking about the students.
But the parents are doing all the volunteer work to, mostly the parents do a lot of the fundraising work.
Right, but the
Kids do
student
some, but the
performance
parents-
is the draw in this particular one.
But
Let's not,
the parents are doing all the work for the dinner.
I get that. They're
So,
only coming out to the dinner because there's, kids are performing.
uh,
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's raising kind of ethical flags.
I think the way we get around it is the school properly funds everything. We can't. So, it's catch-22 that we're in, that, we need the uniforms, we need.
No, I'm thinking there should be like a mother booster group that all the funds go into, as opposed to so many splinter groups.
Well, I mean, we do have, think of it that way, we do have the foundation as a whole piece there. And I get what you're saying, I don't know.
I'm just torn, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying what's right, what's wrong. I'm just thinking out loud here that it bothers me a little bit. That there are some kids that can't get what they need, and other
It's
kids
optional.
get.
They don't have to do it. I mean, if the parent had read the information, they would have known back in September when they received it, or whenever they received it, that, in March, this is something that was required. If they had, the reason I think why it just came out recently is because they just, it popped up on the radar, so they didn't realize it or didn't read it. So, I mean, if there's an objection to doing it, they have that choice before the school year. They don't have to participate.
Yep,
They're not
I
being
understood
forced.
that, and I'm happy about that. If there's an alternate assignment.
Well, piggybacking off what Mr. Revcap said, in addition to what you were saying about maybe parents wouldn't volunteer, right, if the money was being split, the parents are also the ones who, generally speaking, are providing the funds, right? It's not sure, the kids are the draw, but the people actually providing the money is the parents. So if they don't feel like the money is going to a group that if they don't feel like the money is going where they want it to, they may be less likely to donate in the first place, right? So,
As far as the actual concern about it being a requirement grade, I mean, I'm trying to think of another. I mean, to me, it makes sense if you were a jazz ensemble, or you're, I mean, obviously, you do these performances. So should you get graded on them? I mean, I'm trying to think of another class that would be the equivalent, but I'm having a hard time, thinking about that.
Like an art. Yeah.
it's sort of similar to saying, we'll have a baseball team, but we won't have any games, right? We'll just go and practice every day.
I mean, you're not going to get great at baseball, but
Right, but you know what I'm saying? To draw a core as a corollary, right? I mean, it's essentially saying.
so I personally don't have an issue with that. They are getting graded on this. That's just my. I know what you're saying about it being after school when is there some responsibility in the school year to make sure the kids can get there or something. I don't. I see your point on that. I'm not sure, but.
And given that there's an alternate assignment, that there's a way for them to receive credit even if for some reason they can't attend, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
That personally.
We can move on. I mean, now Mr. Rathgeb has me thinking, what other examples are there? And that'll be something I'll be pondering for a
I
while.
can think of one.
Science, maybe?
Well, no, I was
Okay.
thinking in the high school, I know that I believe they still go, one of the classes, I think one of the American history classes possibly goes to the Constitution Center as a field trip, which I believe goes a little bit beyond the end of the school day. And they do have an assignment that they complete while they're there. So technically, even though for high school students, obviously, it's much easier to get rides and things like that. But anytime that students go on a field trip,
So we do probably bus.
that extends past the day and they have something to do while they're on the trip that they then hand in for a grade or something like that. Obviously, there's a portion of that that would be requiring them to have a ride home, or possibly a ride to school if they leave early.
And this might just be an issue of communicating, but in my experience, the grades for these extracurricular type events, now again, I'm going back to my own, this could be anecdotal and it could have changed. I know employees have changed in the interim, especially going back to when I was in elementary school, but the grades weren't viewed the way that other grades were, and the approach was different. It wasn't as much you earn 100% by showing up, rather the 100% is something that's kind of built in and it's taken away if you don't. It's more of a negative than it is a positive, and I don't know if that's just another way. In the end of the day, it's the same, I guess. If you go, you get 100%. If you don't, you get a 0, which is the way of marketing it. It was almost more you're cajoled into being there. Instead of this is an opportunity to earn, it's more of an opportunity to be punished if you don't show up.
I guess if busing is a concern, then this is held on a Saturday, right?
March 5th.
So, I mean, an option would be you could run it during a weeknight, and then the kids could get days over. The middle school kids, when there's already a bus that takes kids over from weightlifting. So,
That would be a lot of
there's a good
logistics.
transportation to take the kids from the middle school to that.
Well, what I'm seeing, just based on this discussion, there doesn't really seem to be much. I mean, Mrs. Bites has concerns about fundraising as a whole, but I think that there exists a alternate assignment that reassures a lot of
I think
us.
I'm all right with that, as long as it's clearly communicated.
Yeah, clearly communicated. And my hope would be, I haven't seen the alternate assignment, I'm not sure what it is. I would just hope, and I don't think it would be, because I don't think our staff, I don't think it would be punitive, I hope not. It would just be, I wouldn't, if I had a child who couldn't attend an event, I wouldn't want them to have to write an essay, for example, what their friends got to have fun performing. But,
And I do believe that the alternate assignment is an essay of some sort.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't believe that it's long, and I don't know the topic. So it very well could be a topic that is related to what they would have performed or something like that. I can ask, I can certainly.
yeah, that would be helpful to know. Just, again, going back to it, if they could tie it
And I don't believe that
in.
they have attendance, I mean, I don't, with the exception of a kid who's sick, I don't think that it's ever come up as an issue where a kid hasn't gone to a concert to perform and has had to do the assignment, so.
Well, maybe there's an,
I
Yeah,
don't
that's
think it's
what-
something that they necessarily, that is really drawn upon often, so I can't, but I certainly can find out. This issue, I'll be upfront with you, I had 3 parent concerns. The first 2 you weren't included on, and after I explained the parent, the concern was kind of similar, after I explained what was going on and explained the situation, and they had both already spoken to the teacher. The parent was very nice and said, I understand where you're coming from, my child will attend, and that was kind of the end of it. This parent, however, obviously you saw her email, and that's where this came from. But overall, I mean, I have, my goodness, almost half of my student body who's involved in band or chorus, if not more. And so there were a total of 3 complaints.
Well, it's just my experience that for every one that speaks up, they do represent, 10 or so that will not speak up. So that's why it is a concern, even though we got 1 and 3 is even more concerning. But if you could just assure us that it's not punitive in any way, and
I'll actually send an email right now and ask what it is.
And if there's a short notice cancellation, am I to understand that the only time they can opt out is at the start of the year? When
No.
they sign the form? So if the child cannot make it a day in advance or 2, he will be offered, he or she
Oh, yeah.
will be offered the alternative
Oh, yeah.
assignment. And there's no stigma attached to that child. I think I'm fine with that. Carry on.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that discussion. We'll drop it there. Next up on the agenda, this is Mr. McKnight's topic, and the next few are Mr. McKnight topics. Early college partnership with RAC.
We have like 50 minutes.
Mr. Rathman, are you trying to say something?
No.
Yeah, we do have a long time left, so.
See, Mr. Curtis, we have a long time. The college partnership piece, some of these things on the item list are just, I think, things that we've kind of rolled out, and even in passing sometimes, but ideas we've had on the committee. The early college partnership with RAC, I think the conversation really is around this issue ultimately of transportation down the road. Right now, our students can go to RAC in an early college partnership. They'd have to transport themselves. That's a concern. Anytime we have students driving somewhere, especially from Douglasville to the Penn Street Bridge, which will now be closed, and there's a whole bunch of things going on with RAC, that'll be a problem here in the near future. So we're not ready for the fall for this part of this take on transportation, but it is something I think we want to keep in mind. Mr. Harris and I went down to Monaco, which is 7.2 miles for our students, and a much nicer ride. And we're working on a partnership there for early college as well. And I personally am leaning towards that, even though we'll still have dual enrollment with RAC. And so we'll be able to provide you with more information more as we go. But we're going to also look at tightening the partnership with BCTC. We're asking for some accountability numbers and looking at that funding. And are we really getting our real value? We think BCTC is a terrific program. The question is how many of our kids start the program and finish the program? Are we losing money along the way? Kids are dropping out. So we're trying to get that answer from BCTC and looking at that $1 million plus transportation that we spend there. And is that the best way to spend our money? Or should we be looking at maybe moving some of that activity towards whether it be RAC or Monaco or some other folks? Or if we all just want to fund everything, then we can do that. So that's kind of a quick update on that piece.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say something regarding Montgomery County Community College. As being close to the area, Pottstown being close to Tennyman Area School District, I think that would be great for our students to use that area. And my grandfather used to serve on the Pottstown School Board and the Pottstown Borough Council, and he thinks that the key to Pottstown's revitalization is in that community college. And just, I was up there recently, they're really doing a lot of work in front on the riverfront. They're occupying a lot of new buildings and really doing a lot of renovations. So I think that is a gem in our area that we really could use and take more advantage of. So thank you for your work on that. Is there any, in terms of actual concrete movement and when we might be able to get our kids registered for those classes?
Well, I mean, the students, like I said, are we'll go through the spring registration now of all of our work, and they will be registering. The question is going to be coming to the parents, do we want our child to drive and do that 2 days a week? So it's in play, so to speak. Counselors will talk to students about it, students will talk to their parents.
I imagine it must be a really challenging thing to schedule.
Well, it ends up on a Tuesday, Thursday at RAC, for example, and so you build some things specifically. You create some special scheduling. One of the mantras that we've been pushing at the high school is really about customization for students. I mean, that they can get not exactly what they want every single time, but more, as much as we possibly can. So if we have to create some special scheduling to do that, we will. Also, in the conversations that Mr. Hurley and Mr. Harris and I have had with a number of groups is, and we'll find out with Mr. Thompson, the architect, about space. But my ideal situation with our administrative team at the high school would be is to have a single classroom that is dedicated to college and universities to come in and provide instruction and service points there. That diminishes some transportation issues as well. All these things, as I said to you when we were talking, I think, in December, we need you to be patient and dynamic with it. I always think of these opportunities in 15-month plannings. So we have our things that are going to come on for this fall. So many of the things we're talking about now, we'll be looking at the 17-18 year going out.
Well, you mentioned the talk about customization, which I think is great, and it's nice to hear that. Tying that into our recent achievement when it comes to offering advanced placement courses, one of my biggest regrets as a DBHS alumnus is, was not taking advantage of all of the AP offerings. Like, for example, I could have taken AP political science. I could have taken that test, even though Denison High School did not offer that course. Is there a way that we could identify students who may have a unique skill set or may, from their own just passions and interests, for example, trying to do an AP course that we don't offer? It's much more difficult now because of all the ones that we've added up here.
Well, computer science.
Sure. We offer 2 years of computer science 1 and honors computer science 2. If a kid is doing fantastic in computer science 2, would it be possible for our guidance department or Mr. Simmons to say to that student, hey, you're really good. Have you considered possibly registering for the AP test, and you can use that credit for college? Even though we do that.
I mean, as you know, you don't have to have a course.
I know you can do it, but my question is more regarding the communication and letting those students know that, hey, this is an option that may be really good for you.
Right. Yeah, I think we have to spend some time talking about that as a team to get them to do it. I don't think we do that frequently, informing students that, yes, you could take an AP test and get the credit. So it's something we'll put on our agenda for next time.
Perfect. If I can offer that challenge up to you, because I think that would be talking about customization. I mean, there are all these opportunities out there. I think Mr. Scott wants to say something. I'll just add for the record that Mr. Scott has joined us.
I was just going to say that something that might happen during a parent-teacher conference with some kids, since you have the parents there front and center.
Right, yeah. So the scheduling piece is going to start to get underway. Teachers have made their recommendations they thought they would do today. Mrs. Briasha, they were final recommendations today. So, yeah, but then by midnight tonight, so teachers will have them in, the guidance counselor will start, vetting them and speaking with students. And at that stage, not all the parents come in to have that meeting, some do. But I think that we just continue to deliver the message, I think, and where there are parent conferences, we do that and beyond.
Any further discussion on early college partnership? All right, if not, we'll move on to item 7, 8th, and 9th grade transition and transitory program, dropout prevention.
Right. Okay, so there's a lot in that situation, and a lot of credit to our guidance department, especially Melissa Holland. I kind of project managed her with this, and she has done a lot of work and came up with some proposals. I told her our constraints were, cost neutral or cost minimal, and so it pretty much is that. So designing a program in the 9th grade, one of the things we've done is reduce the amount of credits they're allowed to take in 9th grade, but we'll be driving in some support pieces in there to help them in the transition. And then we're looking at kind of, in this next year, single, what I call single one-off events in terms of supporting them in transition. Just about what it's like to be in a high school, what kind of study skills do you need. I don't know if Jenny does this at the middle school, but I know a lot of middle schools do a lot of things on study habits and study skills. We don't think we need to offer a course on study skills. We think we do need to, once a quarter, maybe do an assembly and a training with students about this is how you study for high school, this is how you have 7 courses or 8 or 9 courses or whatever you have. So there'll be pieces like that, there'll be pieces on bullying and respect, and some of those elements will be coming in specifically to that 9th grade group to help the transition. So it's a pretty fleshed out program, and I think once we have it laid out, it would be best if I have Mrs. Holland come over, maybe that team make a presentation to the board so you guys can see it and see some of the good ideas that they've evolved.
Thank you for that. I'm just wondering if you can identify the biggest issue for students between that 8th and 9th grade year, what would that be? Like, what's the number one? If there is something that just stands out above and beyond.
Well, Jenny and I have talked about this somewhat. We're looking at what's coming, the things at the middle school, the things we're expecting at the high school. How can we help support more? So her insight to these kids coming out is very important, at least for us to understand the type of students that we're seeing and what she thinks they can handle and do. So that piece is just the communication between the middle school and the high school and that growing relationship and partnership, that there really is a bridge between these two places. So we go over and meet, and we were over last week, 2 weeks ago, to do a little presentation with all the 8th graders. Ann Fink is going to come up. She's partnering on this committee for the transition team. Ann, right? Yeah, so we have this better communication, this better liaisoning going on between the two buildings, I think. Or I don't want to say it's better, but it's happening in a bridged way. So we speak to each other a couple times a month. If she's busy, I'm busy, but that we intentionally talk about those issues. The biggest issue for us is getting our math situation right, I think. So the students are placed correctly in the math programming out of 8th grade and into 9th grade. So I think that's going to take a step forward with the proper support for kids so they're not overwhelmed, they don't become hopeless and feel hopeless as they struggle, and we put those pieces in there. So that would be the single one thing, of getting the students placed correctly.
Okay, and is a lot of that to do with just how differentiated math is coming out of the high school with the tracks and all that?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to it. I think that some of it is just a different design of what is expected of middle schools across the state. Middle schools across the state are generally pointed towards PSSA.
Yeah.
High schools are not. The PSSA test in 8th grade, I'll just throw out a number, it's about 22% is algebra. But they spend a lot of time getting ready for the other 78% of the test as well. So then students come into 9th grade and the strongest students are they can do anything, honestly. But the kids who are marginal then run into the wall. And so that's where they kind of get off the track. And so how do we best give them what they need, in 9th grade? And so that's kind of what the Foundations of Algebra course is going to be about going forward. And that's part of the transition program, things like that.
Well, you make a really good point there. That is one I don't think is made enough regarding the standardized tests, because we talk a lot about how much time they take up and about how, just mainly about the timing and how it's a waste of talent among our staff, just proctoring exams. But looking at it that way, that they can actually serve as a way to inhibit growth. And when you have these kids, I like that expression, running into a wall. I mean, that's not the way I looked at it really before, so thank you for sharing that. And I think that's something we could take away when it comes to just, if we interact with any legislators who talk about the state exams or anything, to keep that in mind. But that's just an aside. Does anybody else have anything on the 8th, 9th grade transition?
Just to clarify then, the number one hindrance for the student success in 9th grade is sort of anxiety then?
I think the number one hindrance academically is the math situation.
Okay.
The number one, socially emotionally, is coming out of an environment. And I'm always careful on how I say this, because I think that the middle school does a great job on their mission. And Jenny even says that maybe we coddle them too much. I don't think we coddle them too much. I think you coddle them appropriately. That's the right word. You're supporting them. We're not doing a good enough job at the 9th grade side of creating some scaffold and support there. It's kind of like you go from that environment to boom, it's high school, and there's this expectation that kids can do that. And I don't think they do it that well. So then you have, kind of, if a student is struggling academically a little bit, and now they're also struggling socially and emotionally, it's a formula for disaster. And so we have to control what we can control. And by writing the math piece and creating some of these transitional pieces about, socially and emotionally, I think we're on the right track. We definitely don't have the right answer, but it's going to take a couple years to really figure out what is the right insertion point. But
So specifically though, is it a matter of the atmosphere? Like, are they sitting in one class all day in middle school and then they have to learn how to move around the building, hit the locker, all that strategy in high school? Is it that? So, I mean, that's what my kids had a lot of anxiety with. I'm just wondering if that's...
In middle school, they go from being on a team where they only have, say, these 4 teachers, and those teachers have 100 of the kids, and they meet once a week, and they talk about the kids, and if the kids are struggling, they talk about it, and they work with them, and they do all of this stuff to try to help the kids be successful.
Right.
And there's just a lot of that communication, whereas then the kids move on to 9th grade, and they
And
can have all of
scaffolding.
these different
Yeah.
teachers, and it's not structured that way, which is fine, but there needs to be, that's why we've been talking, there needs to be something, because they can't just go from all of these teachers being on top and probably 2 in your business to
Right.
going up there, and unless 2 people happen to be talking, don't necessarily know that a kid is struggling in several of their classes, unless that kid is actively going to guidance or meeting with someone or
Yeah.
parents calling or whatever, and,
Thank you.
it's just hard.
So one of the pieces that we will be looking at, but it's not going to happen this year, but it will be happening. I don't know what the cost is yet, so it's hard for me to say we should go this way. But there's a concept called teaming and looping for 9th and 10th grade. So what looping means is that students have the same teacher for 2 years, okay, in math, in the 4 classes. And so obviously that teacher and student become very familiar with each other, and the support level is very high. And in a place like our high school has a great chance to work because we don't have a high transiency population. And that's where looping really works well, when that bond can be made and maintained. You do see this sometimes in urban schools. The problem in urban schools is the transiency population is very high for the students and the teachers. The students are leaving and going to different places, and the teachers are leaving the urban schools and going to the suburban schools. So it breaks down quite a bit. But the research is very strong, but I don't think I'm ready to deliver, or we're ready to deliver that out yet, that that's a solution for us. But we think it is, so we got to prove it.
Thank you for that vivid illustration. I totally understand what you're saying about the different, the scaffolding that's not in place that they've grown sort of accustomed to by design. It's what we're doing. It's not a flaw. It's just a bridge got to be got. Thank you.
One other thing to think about, and there's going to be obviously more conversation, resulting from Thursday and from the board. And it's going to be talking again, do we move 5th grade to the middle school and have it 5 through 8, which are along those lines, and it's going to be a lot of discussion on that. So is one of the if down the road that does happen, or even if it doesn't happen, does it make any kind of sense to I know we talked a little bit last year about the junior high model. Does it make sense to make the 8th grade into like a junior high model as opposed to the middle school model? Would that help?
When you say the 8th grade, you mean like what 8th and 9th grade?
No, well, so the 8th grade would no longer be a team.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So they'd actually have, more of a.
Like more of a,
Yeah,
the
more of a
whole
high
idea of
school.
scaffold is that you remove it. So you're saying if you bring middle school and you have that full-fledged model in 5th, 6th, and 7th, then they can start to take it away a little bit, so they transition. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, looking at and talking about for sure.
So
That's all we're
something else to add to the list.
Yeah, that was something I was actually going to bring up next, so thank you for bringing that up, Dave, talking about that. I had 2 things. Talking about the scaffolding, I remember the biggest transition point, the thing that most people talked about, including teachers when I was moving from middle school to high school, was that in the high school, you were allowed to chew gum. I remember that was the big selling point for high school when I was in middle school. It's just fun reminiscing about that. Dave covered my other point. Finally,
Was it tested, you walk and chew at the same time?
well, that may be part of it. I've seen some of the gum end up in the hallway. Some students may have flunked that exam. But again, going back to this transition between 8th and 9th grade, are there any schools that we can identify that do this very well? Maybe Tredeffrin, some of those main high schools?
I'll just share with you that because I worked down there. Trinidad gets great results, and I spent time over there when we were at Phoenixville trying to decide why they get great results. And what we found was that their grade results were highly correlated to their student population. You know, if you have, and they do, their poverty population is below 5% of the grade. What you're looking for in these situations, honestly, is who are the outlier schools that are superseding their socioeconomic status. So, for example, Mechanicsburg is a school that does it very well. So there are a number of schools that do that. You know, their success rate is at 80 or 90%, and their poverty rate's at 30%. So there's a 10-15% gap in performance.
Okay, well, let's look at Mechanicsburg then, maybe if they have a good model. You've been doing this, so I'm probably just reciting stuff that you're already doing. But I'm interested, now that you mentioned there's some of these outliers, where would you put Daniel Boone within that?
In terms of the poverty outlier, it's
Yeah.
about right on point. Our poverty is 22%, okay? And we had a little setback on SPP this year, but generally speaking, it's outperforming at the high school level, and maybe district-wide, Rob, you can weigh in. We're at 83.4, I think, the year before. So, you know, but our poverty level is around 22%. So if you're superseding on the minimum test score, state test score, beyond, you know, 82%, you're probably doing better. So you would be one of the outlier groups.
I mean, there are always different ways to measure these
It's
things.
it's what metric you pick.
Yeah, I mean, if we use the College Board's metric, we're one of the best.
There you go.
So, all right, well, if nobody else has anything on the 8th to 9th grade transition and transitory program / dropout prevention, the dropout prevention component, is that just tied into giving these kids that scaffold, or is there something else that we haven't really talked about?
No, I think if we could solve dropout prevention, we'd all have a lot of money. So there's many pieces that we don't even understand it, honestly, and what's causing it and what's driving it. We think we have our finger on a few things, but there are many things to continue to dig in and look at here.
When will you be able to report back on the credit recovery and how successful that's been?
Well, it's not even starting technically till right now. So students think credit recovery, where they were mathematically eliminated, and we don't have very many kids, quite honestly, who are mathematically eliminated. You'd have to have a 19% average right now.
Wow.
Because for the 2 quarters, the remaining courses, if you had 20% and 100%, you still have a possibility. Credit recovery in terms, because we approved it in the fall, really, it'll probably take us a year or two to really say, this is how many credits we've recovered. And students then got back on track. You're not going to be able to see it, this year. We may have a feel-good story or two.
Good. I mean, you'll be able to report back number of least important, how much money the district has saved that could be diverted to other programs, and most importantly, you'll be able to report back the number of students who have gotten back on track.
Yeah.
And that'll be a really, I know I'm interested in hearing that. All right, great. Moving on to item number 8, DBHS math programming.
We kind of hit it, this foundations piece, and that was kind of part of this dropout conversation. We have the foundations course, 9th grade, kind of bridging that gap, and then also the issue at the top and in 12th grade, while we're going through this 3-year model, as the foundation students come online, so 8th grade, 1 to 9th grade, what about the kids who are in the system? So we need a viable alternative, currently to trigonometry, which is this, the course is going to be the elementary stats and personal finance course, which we've had, and we're recrafting that to be more supportive of students who may not be trig calc students. So that's where we're on the program piece.
All right. Does anybody have any comment on the math programming in the high school? All right. I think this is the last item on our Mr. McKnight lineup here.
Show.
Yeah. DBHS assessment programming.
I think this one, and even I was trying to recall where this comes from, what this topic is. I think it's the issue of how much assessment we're doing. I think we had kind of a little bit of a generic conversation one night about, boy, we have a lot of test dates, and too many test dates, really. If you do the actual addition and subtraction in a typical high school course, 180 days, with all the testing and assessments that you do, you're probably losing around 30 days. So now you're down to 150. Then you look at special programming and other things that happen in a school, and you usually really have around 120 days of instruction. So I'm not sure that we can, but we're looking at how do we minimize the amount of testing we've taken at each department. How do we just reduce this load and still keep ourselves on track for the important pieces?
Yeah, I think when it comes to testing, there's and including among this committee and board members, there's been a pushback against all of this testing. But when looking at it, I think the best way to do it is looking at return on investment. with these state mandated tests, I mean, we have to give them, but what do we really get out of them? As a district, not that much. I know as at least serving on this committee, the results from the state, they don't tell us what we need to know. They don't tell us the things that we're doing well, the things we're not doing well when it comes to our courses, at least in my view. But again, it all comes down to that return on investment. If there, like for example, the civics component I mentioned, I think that would tell us a whole lot. But all right, anybody else have any
Let
comments?
me just say this, I think one of the things, not to get another bullet on this conversation list, but I would love if the board as a curriculum committee and we as the administration took on, what are the metrics that we really want to define? What is it that we want to measure that says we are doing a good job at high school? Because quite honestly, you point out the state test issue. I mean, if we want it to be the SPP, then we should say that, and we should dedicate our resources to that, the assessments and those trigger courses. But if we think that we can be something bigger and grander, then we need to put, well, what is the measurement, what are those things and what is the measurement of those things? And so that's a deep, rich conversation I think we should take on and look at, quite frankly for me, what kind of, are we moving our SAT scores forward? One of the metrics I would like to see us use is, are our students getting offered to their first choice? Whatever, and that takes some soft data for sure, and collecting it is tricky. But those are, really, why are we here if it's not to help students and families get to where they want to go? So, without going on much further.
No, that's
I'd love to
great.
just take that on.
That's good. And I guess I'll issue a challenge to members of the committee to identify our own metrics we'd like to use, and I like those from Mr. McKnight. I think that would be a good topic for our next meeting, because we have to, in order to measure our own progress, we have to get a baseline. We have to know what we want to measure. I think that's a really good contribution there.
I agree.
So we can work on that. But I'm very interested in seeing what the administration at the high school has to say. And you know what? For all of our schools, I'd like to have a discussion on that front. If I were a principal of an elementary school, I'd like to know from Mrs. Rexroad, what would successful measure, because I mean, in terms of Mr. McKnight, we're talking about students moving from high school to college. At the elementary level, we're talking about moving from elementary to middle school, and from middle school to high school. It would be great if we could have a breakdown for all of our buildings, like what metrics we'd like to measure ourselves against when it comes to curriculum. So just something for us all to think about, administrators, committee members. A nice challenge for next month. All right. Anything else on assessment programming and that little side item for next month? All right, nothing. Finally, on to item 10 here. We're moving along very quickly. This is something I brought up a few months ago, and I thought it would be a good time to bring it back up. Alumni recognition. I know I mainly think about the Pottstown High School program. They have the alumni honor roll recognizing alums who have gone on to do great things in business and all types of realms. I know we have our athletic wall of fame at the high school. And Mr. McKnight and I and this committee have had conversations about having a similar program, or starting a similar program for more career type achievements, and not just careers, but life in general. And I just wanted to see if there was any movement on that. We decided we might want to call it an alumni wall of honor instead of wall of fame. But I think that would offer a good, not only a way to recognize, again, the students who go on to do big things, but also a group of people who we can call on as a high school, as a middle school, as elementary schools, as a resource almost. If we need a commencement speaker, if I'm teaching a business and enterprise class, and we have somebody on the alumni wall of honor who started a business, or if I'm a computer science teacher and I want somebody who's involved in computer programming, maybe somebody launched a big app who's a Daniel Boone alum, maybe bring them in and they can offer their expertise, all in the name of bettering their alma mater and helping other students. But this again would offer an avenue to get those contact pieces, and it goes back to something the board had tried, I think 6 or 7 years ago, and that was to develop a comprehensive list of, a database really of alums and alumni. And that really is such a huge undertaking, but at the very least, this would get us the cream of the crop, I guess that's the expression, the top of the top there, the best of the best, and we can always use them as a resource. The creme de la creme, that's it. My French, I didn't take anything in French. So I just talked a lot to recount what we discussed before, but Has there been any movement on that from Mr. McKnight or Mr. Hurley, or have any other committee members given any thought? If not, just something again to think about moving forward. We could have something in place. But just another little project to work on.
I have a comment on that, if I may. I was just wondering if we could consider what I call preferred seating at all of our events. Whenever we have, Spaghetti and Sonata, can we have a little section that's reserved for our alumni, and encourage them to come and free and join in and bring their spirit and their stay engaged with their school, so that they can maybe become endeared to the school, and they can become a resource for speakers or something. It's something we talked about at the last school I was at, and kind of roll out the red carpet for our alumni in our events.
That would be interesting, not in terms of, I think it would be a bureaucratic and logistic nightmare to have, how would you determine somebody's an alum or not? But maybe have an alumni section, maybe have a designated area of the, at the football stadium. If you're an alum, you can sit here, not that you're required to, not that people who aren't alums, they're sitting there to be kicked out, but just an area maybe for people to mingle and catch up with friends.
It's neat to see them mingle, and it's kind of contagious. It builds spirit when you see them all get together.
I think the idea is a good one to pass along. Maybe not having a specific...
It's not a board issue.
Just
certainly
an idea.
Not a board initiative,
but I think that's something, us Daniel Boone graduates, we spend 13 years of our lives from kindergarten to 12th grade in the district, and I think a lot of us, and we don't want to just give it up after 12th grade, and any way that we as a district can harness that potential, I think it's only good for our
especially it's 4
students.
years right after graduation, when they're still in college, and they do come back around Christmas, and they do yearn to connect a little bit. So if there's any Christmas concerts or something, then we can...
Mr. McKnight could attest to the issue that, I guess when he got here, you had a lot of alums coming to visit during the school day, and you had to put a stop to that just because it was interfering with the
We
academics.
just had to get them to sign it.
At the very least, sign it,
I don't want to put a stop.
They do.
Yeah, but again, harnessing that. But just again, the challenge to work on, come up with some type of project or a proposal. All right, next up here, and this is the final topic we have in public comment, and we have a lot of time left. So if the committee has other topics to discuss, then textbook purchase, actually there's one more before comment. But item 11, 2016-17 textbook purchases. I just want to check in with Mr. Hurley because again, we had a big issue with this at the end of last school year, or over this summer. What's the status right now?
Yeah, guys, right now, for about the last 4 to 5 curriculum meetings, I've been bringing the textbooks that we're anticipating purchasing for your viewing. I know a couple of you stopped in my office the other day and you viewed some of those also. Those textbooks right there are ready to go and ready to go to the full board whenever you guys decide you want to push that forward. We do have 2 more editions coming from the new high school math courses, and they'll be coming here preferably for the next curriculum meeting for you guys to view them also, and want to get them in front of the whole board also. And that's for the courses you approved in the course catalog.
Can you do me a favor? And again, we discussed this I discussed this one-on-one with you at least. Perhaps when it comes to reviewing these books, I know I was wondering, and some other members of the committee were wondering, how do we evaluate which books we're going to use? And we had the idea to put together a form, like a little piece of paper that shows, well, this is what we were looking for, and then when it comes to ordering, we check prices.
What they're looking for, first, they're looking for alignment to standards. Most textbooks now, though, because of the nature of the standards, are aligning their textbooks to the standards pretty closely. However, for example, a history book, they're doing a readability assessment on that to make sure it's on grade level. It's not way above or way below grade level in terms of that type of thing. And obviously, they're looking for different tools that are user-friendly for the students and also for the teachers in terms of the instruction itself. But those are just some of the things that go into that, and certainly we can be more transparent with you guys in regards to how we go about looking for those.
Well, one of the specific things we were talking about was this American history book that I looked through, and I think is fantastic personally. But you said there was another history book that was reviewed, and we decided to go with this one. And I just think it would be great for the committee to know, well, we went with this one for these reasons. Just because it's a pretty mysterious process to us so far. And I think that would be great to have at form, to just send out to the full board so their questions could be answered. But the reason I'm bringing this up really is because the process doesn't, the board approval process doesn't really exist right now. I want to come up with some type of standardized procedure that we'd go through. Like, let's say we want to get next year some new textbooks for these subjects. Well, where does it begin? What are the different steps? And I think that this form would be a good place to start, just because it would be like a piece of paper that can then be filed away, and we'd always know, like, this is the reasons we chose this series, or these are the reasons we chose this series. And I think a box should be included that we went to look and compare prices, and we determined this supplier was the most affordable.
A lot of times, and your points are very well taken here, a lot of times what happens is when we find a textbook we like, we're talking to different companies, and we're negotiating with the companies too, and we're talking to them. We got 2 books that are very close, and we're talking to Pearson, we're talking to Houghton Mifflin, and we're saying, okay, we like your book better than this, but your price point's higher, and so we're trying to negotiate with them to drive it down. The other piece, which there's negotiation also, is with the shipping. That's a big piece. Textbooks cost a ton of money. Last year, for example, we were able to save $10,000 on shipping. Houghton Mifflin came in high this summer on the shipping price for one of the things, and we turned around, and I'll give Mike credit for this, because I showed him what they were asking for shipping. He went to UPS, asked them for the same thing, and all of a sudden it cost like $8,000 less. Went back to Houghton Mifflin, all of a sudden the shipping costs went down for us. So like those types of things we're trying to do as a group and an entire administrative team in terms of driving costs down for these types of things. I know Mr. McKnight, for the most recent textbooks that we're looking at for math, was looking at some used textbooks on Fola to try to drive some costs down. So it's kind of a team effort when we look at driving costs on these things, and they're real. I mean, every dollar counts on these types of things.
Yep.
Has there also been any update on having a discussion with technology and I know we've had this discussion before, but as far as down the line, getting some of these on text as the electronics?
Yeah, and actually we're right in the middle of looking at some of this right now. We've had 2 or 3 different meetings with the Apple in regards to looking at some digital textbooks. There is some open source stuff out there. Obviously, there's costs for like the iPads themselves. We've actually priced out a little bit of that right now. We're in the preliminary stages. There is some open source stuff there that is intriguing. We're looking at how closely it's aligned to the PA academic standards. Pennsylvania is starting to put, through PA Learns, is starting to put out some free stuff that is available. It's not all there yet. You can also online, if like companies like Pearson now, not all their textbooks and not all the subjects, but what they're doing is they're putting online versions of their textbook, and it might cost $80 for the print version, and it might cost $25 for the digital version. So we're looking at a whole variety of things down the road. We're not there yet as a group, but we're really looking into this. In fact, we're going Thursday to the String Theory School in Philadelphia to visit. They've gone on iPads completely. There's a school district out in Columbia, out in the Harrisburg area, I think it's out towards York, and they also have gone on online, so we are looking into that pretty heavily. Not only, I mean, there's 2 angles we're looking at this from, is from a cost perspective, but we're also looking at, can we provide a better educational resource for our students with the digital technology? There's some other pieces to that too, which we have to look in. Our infrastructure in terms of our wireless network is not there yet, so that's also a price point we have to look at.
Upgrading that?
We're trying, that's our bandwidth, that's step 1. Yeah, that's step 1 is to get the bandwidth. Now we need it, yeah, exactly. So we're working in that process. Once Scott puts the bandwidth, gets that taken care of, we're going to be fine there. And then we got to look at just getting the wireless access ports and things like that. Something like that we're thinking right now. We're very preliminary, but we're thinking about trying to do something in terms of a pilot program first, see how it works and see if we can get it up and going like that. But again, we're such at the beginning stages, I don't want to speculate too much here.
And the other thought I had was, now my daughter's in college, and we're paying, one of the things that she's doing is renting. So I didn't know if that was, maybe we have a couple of classes that maybe we're due to swap out a new book, but we're not quite there yet. Instead of buying some, for short sum, instead of buying them, is it possible to rent? Just cover for a year, or.
And that's a fair question. There are, and Mr. Small's more familiar with the renting thing with textbooks, so that's certainly something we can talk to Mr. Small about as a possibility also.
Just because instead of buying new ones, we're going to use them for a year or 2. never get the new, new edition or new, so.
Mhm. Good, great questions, great comments.
Yes, I remember what I was going to ask now. When it comes to actually approving the textbooks for purchase that you have about ready to go, I think the way we should do it, I'll include on the agenda for the CNI committee those proposals for next month. And if the committee's fine with it, I think that would be a good time to vote to move those books forward. Or if not, we could have a discussion at that meeting in regard to specific titles. But I think that would be a good place to start. And then if we do approve them, go on to the full board, and then that'll be that.
Yeah, and the other piece, which we're gonna, and actually I didn't bring this out to you, I bring it out to the last meetings, but the other piece that'll be on there, it places the textbooks at the younger elementary levels, when you're in the FOSS kicks, and I showed a couple of you who were in my office the other day what they look like. So that's also probably should be part of that approval process if we're doing,
Yes.
that's significant, it's not a small resource, that's a pretty significant resource.
So, Mr. Chairman, you're saying that it would be written on the next curriculum, what we're approving, what the name of the book, the publisher, the curriculum?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to get at here.
Subject that it would be applied to?
I'm thinking that we
Column
list-
document?
I'm not even thinking columns. We list the title, we list the author, publisher, and I think the ISBN number. And then you can easily just plug that in. You can go see all the information you want. We'll just take that. It could even be an appendix to the agenda, and it goes right on the board.
With all due respect, what class it would actually be used in here at Boone?
Yeah, that'll be helpful to know too.
Sure. No problem.
We'll put something together and we can discuss it next committee meeting if there are any changes we want to make, any more information.
It's the
But
start
again,
of a library, really.
well, what I'm saying is for this, it's the start of a new process of getting these textbooks approved the way they should be and the way the policy dictates it should be done, instead of just appearing on the agenda without any real review. This will be a nice, thorough process that can be replicated for a long time. All right. Anybody else have any comment on the textbook purchases? We'll talk about it more next month. All right, next up, I just wanted to do some housekeeping for the committee. This should be brief. I was looking through the action item list, and I just wanted to check on a few different items. I know we discussed a while back, long time back, it might have been September, secondary class size discussion, and we never really, I don't know what we wanted to accomplish with that necessarily, other than have a discussion, which we did, but I still have it on your items in progress. Mr. Rathke, you were the one who brought this up. Are we good with that? Can I take that off the docket?
I don't recall having a discussion on secondary class size.
Oh,
Was it me?
we did, I remember. It was in general about the class size. We talked about the middle school and the guidelines, and if there's something similar.
And
We didn't come to any
we don't have
resolution.
guidelines. We don't have guidelines.
Not for the secondary level, I don't think, but just trying to figure out where that conversation topic's going, and if I should bring it back. We
I'll
want to have more
review, I'll check
discussion.
my notes and see if I can find anything.
All right,
Mrs. White's the keeper of the.
that's right.
No, it's
The secretary, yeah, the scribe, that's better. Next up was something that Mrs. Kiesel talked about a while back, elementary report cards. And she was in the process of developing a standards-based report card, and on here it has the deadline be for March. To come back.
Here's where we're at right now, Connor. We've had several in-service days because of the snow. It's eliminated some in-service days, which get pushed to the end of the year. So what we're going to be working on that in the late spring. Hopefully we'll have something to you by June for that particular topic, okay?
Thanks.
So if you want to put that on your table list there.
Yeah. So we'd be looking to do that for next school year. Well, the issue is, I mean, for June, we have to discuss it in committee, and then the full board would.
It will be.
So I just want to make sure we'll have
Yeah,
time.
yeah, we may get it done by then, but let me, right now, I'll set a deadline for June,
Okay.
even what our schedule is for different things we're doing.
Then, two more things. One was this is a request from Mrs. Bites, Project Lead the Way. Is that still something you want to
I
discuss?
think that was about 3 superintendents ago. It was,
It wasn't. It was a few months ago. I remember you asking.
it's a 501 nonprofit organization that develops STEM curriculum for use by elementary, middle, and high school. And I think we were hoping to get a report from the administration if there was any interest in that. That's all.
We use it at the middle school.
Oh, okay.
You do?
Yeah.
Can you explain how? Did I miss that in your
I'm going to
presentation?
tell you that I am not very well versed in it.
Okay.
How about we
I know
talk
that
about it
Our
next-
technology education program is that way. Maybe Mr. Hurley knows a little bit more than I do, but they do.
You know what, can you just
get back to us on something?
I can jump in here and just give you a brief synopsis in 30 seconds. Basically, it's a lot of STEM types of things. There's a little bit of robotics involved in it. We actually got it through a grant a couple of years ago where the kids are actually programming, simple programming language, a little robot. They can move and do some other things. There's some engineering stuff. They make, I think they like try to make a plane fly and how far and the aerodynamics behind that. There's some publishing components to that also, using some software. I'm not overly familiar with that particular piece, but it's one of the neat things they do. They create like a restaurant simulation using like different measurements and different things like that. They actually create a project involved in it. It's really neat. If you get a chance and you stop by one day, let me know ahead of time. I'll take you over to, if you want to see that one in action. It's really a hands-on class. It's what we should be doing as much as we can. It's good for kids. So please take me up on that invitation.
I will.
I'd like to see that too.
So what is it, the relationship though, it's something we purchase these?
We spent a lot of money a long time ago to get involved in this and that. We were probably ahead of the curve a little bit of that about 8 years ago or so, and when we got the program up and going, it used to be like a wood shop class, and that is very valuable, by the way, and it was turned into a technology education class, and part of that was purchasing this curriculum, the materials and the stuff that you need with this curriculum itself.
So do we still have those materials?
Yeah, some of it's consumable, we replace that daily in our
Some of
budget,
it.
yeah, and we just have to keep replacing some of it, but some of it we still have and still use, obviously.
Sounds real neat. We're gonna go over it.
Please come over and see that.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Mrs. Bikes, are you good on that then? We can take that off the future topic
Yes,
list?
thank you.
All right, and finally, I'd like at our next meeting to get a little presentation, maybe no longer than 15 minutes, from Mrs. Mikowski on special education. So we'll be in touch about that.
Oh, great.
But thank you. We talk so much, I think this area we need to. All right.
It sounds like what that's on cancer.
Yeah. All right. Next up is public comment for curriculum and instruction. We got a lot done tonight.
Good job.
Any
Mr.
public
Chairman.
comment? All right, motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right. Meeting adjourned 7:18.